This is The Civil Fleet, the podcast focused on the activist-led refugee rescue and support missions across Fortress Europe, with me, Ben Coles. In today's episode, we're going to speak with Jelka and Amara. Amara was one of about 108 people who was rescued by an oil tanker called the Hiblu 1 in March 2019 after escaping Libya. The European authorities ordered the crew of the Hiblu 1 to wait for the Libyan coastguards to come and take the rescued back to the war-torn country. But the rescued convinced the crew to not return them to that hell and to sail north instead. Amara, along with fellow teenagers Abdalla and Kadar, acted as translators between the refugees and the crew. But the Maltese special forces raided the ship in full tactical gear as it got close to the island nation. Amara, Abdalla and Kadar were arrested and accused of terrorism, piracy and worse for what is essentially an extraordinary act of humanitarianism. They have been stuck in a bureaucratic legal nightmare for 4 years while the Maltese prosecutors tried to figure out exactly what crime to charge them with. We're going to hear a little bit from Amara briefly about halfway through today's episode, but with the pre-trial in Malta still hanging over his head, he is unable to tell us too much about what happened. And so we're mainly going to be speaking with Jelka from the Free Hiblu 3 campaign. She's going to tell us more about what happened to Amara, Abdalla and Kadar and the campaign to free them. As usual, before we get into today's episode, I'd like to remind you to go check out thecivilfleet.com. You can find more stories there. As mentioned in the previous episode, I've published this exclusive story, which you can find on our website now, about the doubling in the numbers of deaths in UK Home Office asylum seeker accommodation. It's pretty scary. What's happening, and it's been shared quite a lot on Twitter, so I'll also link to it in the show notes here so you can check that story out if you like. Also, if you like what the Civil Fleet is doing and you want to help us to continue to platform the refugees, the campaigners, the activists, the lawyers and journalists and the people that we have on the Civil Fleet, then you can do so by donating a small bit of money or an absolute wedge of cash if you like. To do that, you can go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet. That's ko-fi.com/civilfleet. Any donations that you send us will be greatly appreciated. I think that's everything I have to say before we get into today's episode. Yeah, that's it. All right, on with the show. Okay, Jelka, thank you very much for coming on the Civil Fleet podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about the Hiblu 3 case today and the three guys, Abdalla, Amara and Kadar, and what happened to them and what's still happening to them. It's a really interesting case. It's actually one of the first stories that I wrote about that got me interested in the Civil Fleet, the civilian actors.
Wow.
And it was like, I think I wrote about it not long after everything happened for the newspaper I work for. And and since then, it's taken me on this long journey. So it's really nice to get you on. It's really good to talk about the Hiblu 3 on the podcast, which I've been doing for 2 years now, which is pretty crazy.
Yes.
Anyway, Jelka, could you tell us, before we get started, I'd like to ask the people that are on the podcast to tell us a bit about themselves in the hope that people listening realize, you don't have to be, like a public intellectual or whatever to get involved in this kind of stuff. That was kind of weird. So, Jelka, could you tell us about yourself, please?
Yeah, for sure. Let me think. Yeah, so I've been an activist for quite a while now, and when people ask me where this comes from, I had to actually, go back in my past and try to figure that out myself. I'm not sure there's a specific reason, but I know that from my early childhood, I've always been surrounded by people that have less rights than I do. I've been growing up in Berlin, in Kreuzberg, where people migrated in the 80s and 90s too for working reasons. And I've been, watching people being scared of raids, of disappearing because they were born in the wrong place on the earth. And I think the sort of, at least left a mark to some degree. And then I've been traveling and learning throughout my entire life in different places in the world, and just realizing, the privileges I have with my German passport are huge. And this eventually led me to fight for freedom of movement for everybody, and to engage more with people that not just don't have those rights, but also suffer from me having those rights, leading them to not having those rights. So yeah, this is like part of it. And then I think in the past 5, 6, 7 years, I don't really remember, but I've been involved in sea rescue because I always had a connection to water and ships, and had the feeling this is something one needs to do something about now. So I think this is how it all started. And then eventually with the Hiblu 3 case, I've been working, it's been 4 years now, right? And back then I've been working with Sea-Watch with a strong focus on the involvement of merchant vessels in rescue operations or in distress cases. And this eventually led me to the case in 2019. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a similar, I've always been interested in this kind of stuff. Before I became a journalist, I was always interested in freedom of movement and this kind of stuff. Yeah. I think I'm like half American, half British, so like borders have never ever been an issue for me. So then I found it weird that it was difficult for other people, and the whole idea, it was strange to me as a child growing up, I think. And that's why, one of the reasons I think I got so interested in it. I think it's like a similar sort of feeling to you, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, you just mentioned Sea-Watch there. We've had Sea-Watch on the podcast a couple of times. I think my very first episode on the podcast was with Sea-Watch about the Seabird, their planes, their reconnaissance planes. So you've been involved in this kind of stuff for a while. How did you? Well, actually, let's start off with the El Hiblu 3. Anyone listening to this, I imagine people listening to this know a bit about the El Hiblu 3, but I wondered if you could give us the idiot's guide, like the background to what happened, to someone who knows nothing about them.
Yeah, so just very brief. There's a tendency of just opening up a huge story about this. Let me know if I'm going too far. So essentially, the El Hiblu 3 are 3 young men, now all adults. When I got to know them, they were still teenagers. 3 young men that ended up on a rubber boat in the central Mediterranean. The rubber boat taking water, being identified as a distress case by a European patrol aircraft or military aircraft, and then being rescued by an oil tanker who was coordinated to the rescue by the airplane. And then being on the ship attempted to bring them back to Libya, eventually, though, steered towards Malta, where the ship was boarded by military forces. As the captain said, he wasn't in control of the ship, and people requested or demanded him to sail to Europe instead of Libya. And once the ship was raided, 5 young men were arrested as sort of ringleaders of or the people that were guilty of forcing the ship towards Malta. 2 of them were released very quickly after, and 3 of them were held in prison for a long time. And upon arrival, already they were charged with a lot of crimes, among them hijacking the ship, threatening the crew, and a range of terrorist activities. And then they remained in prison for about 9 months. And this all happened 4 years ago this month. And we're still in a pre-trial proceeding, identifying what actually happened and identifying what they've been doing on the ship, which, when we look at them, has been translating between the crew and the people that were rescued, who were scared of getting back to Libya, obviously. So they translated and mediated to make sure the crew understood and the passengers were informed, and eventually helping through that involvement of translation to get people to a safe port, right, instead of the attempted pushback to Libya. Just very brief. I know it's complicated. Let me know if I need to clarify something.
No, that was good. I think that was really clear. I think you said it was 4 years ago, 2019, wasn't it, when they left Libya and they were rescued. And you mentioned the captain of the El Hiblu 1, which is the name of the ship, right? The El Hiblu 3 refers to
exactly.
Is that, and the name? I'll just check if these names are right. Is it Abdalla, Amara, and Kadar?
Yes, exactly.
So they're the El Hiblu 3.
Exactly.
And so the ship.
Yeah, there's a tendency. There's the tendency in criminalization cases, right, that we identify people or a habit that we identify the people with the case occurring for campaigning reasons. We have this with the Juventa. We have this with the Moria 6. With the Samos 2. There's that's where the name comes about. So from the vessel where the situation was occurring. We took it to use this as a campaigning methodology, sort of.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That happens quite a lot in England. It's I can't think of any examples at the moment. There's the Shrewsbury 6 or something. Yeah, that kind of stuff. That happens quite a lot, right? So you mentioned there, I think, that the captain of the El Hiblu, the ship, he was ordered by a reconnaissance, like a European Union reconnaissance plane. I think was it UNAF plane.
Exactly.
That told them to sail south, right, to head back towards Libya. Was that UNAF was that Operation Sophia, or was it a different group by then? Do you know?
No, it was UNAF. As far as I know, it was an Italian aircraft. People on the ship have testified in different situations about seeing a Spanish flag or seeing an Italian flag. I think it's quite clear that it was Italian, but I wouldn't put money on it. So, but definitely UNAF, and UNAF. I'm not sure whether they dictated the return to Libya, but they definitely coordinated the rescue of the people that were on the rubber boat, the 100 people that were on the rubber boat.
Yeah, and I think I can't remember what UNAV stands for, but it's the European. It was like a European Union military mission, isn't it, in the Mediterranean, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's Euro Naval
Forces, Mediterranean, maybe.
Yeah.
I'll link to it. I'll have it in the show notes. Then I'll look clever then, because I'll know what it is in the show notes.
Yeah.
That's it's. And then since then, the El Hiblu 3 have basically been in like a legal nightmare, haven't they?
Yeah.
Like what? So I don't know. Like this, I know this is a long story because it's 4 years. But since I think I remember seeing pictures of like SWAT teams, or like a Maltese SWAT team or something, going onto the boat, which I remember at the time thinking, this is crazy. Like these are just people trying to escape Libya. So what's happened to them sort of after this? They've been in legal limbo for like 4 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just to dial back again quickly, I mean, what happened also after the rescue is that very quickly this case became public, and the neo-fascist minister of Italy, back then Matteo Salvini, also the Maltese news media, they were all reporting about a case of piracy, right? So this was like a big media spectacle already. Even in the US, they were reporting about this. So this was like a huge international case, while the ship was still very close to the Libyan coast. And when the ship then changed course towards Europe, very quickly the armed forces of Malta were sort of notified about the ship, right? So upon arrival in territorial waters, they raided the ship, entered the ship, and then guided the ship to the port, where people were disembarking then, and the others, like the 5 initially, and then the 3 of them for longer, but the 5 were arrested and accused of those charges. So what happened there is that they didn't even know what was happening, right? The guys that they weren't notified about the charges immediately, as far as I know. They were just put in a high security wing in prison. Imagine as a 15, 16, and 19-year-old, where they remained for 2 weeks. And during this time, there were a lot of hearings happening, right? I think on the first 5 days, every day there was a hearing with a lot of testimonies of the crew and so on. So they were detained and then put into regular prison. The 2 minors, the 15 and 16-year-old Amara and Kadar, They were put into a youth facility where they remained for 8 months, or almost 8 months, until the end of November in 2019. Already during that time, they were attending court, accompanied by the legal team, where they established translation and so on and so on. And then in November 2019, we managed to get them out on bail. So since then, they remain in Malta. Obviously, they remain in the same legal situation. Until recently, they had to sign in with the police on a daily basis, for example, every day from 8 to 8 or something like this. And once a month, there's a hearing scheduled for the case. And since then, though, since the beginning of April, this trial is still in a pre-trial phase, right? So this has all right now is about collecting evidence and about formulating eventual charges that will be brought forward by the Attorney General. And then based on this, there's an outline whether this is going to be a criminal proceeding or whatnot. So right now we're still in a pre-trial proceedings. Right now, at the moment, the last 3 hearings, we had one just a few days ago. The last 3 hearings were just basically delays because the prosecution has closed its gathering of evidence. And what we do is usually just go to court and then we leave court. And for people affected by this, for like children growing into adulthood, this is a huge thing, no? The signing in with the police on a daily basis, not being allowed close to the shores of Malta, attending court once a month. So yeah, so for them, this is like the moments of going into court are obviously every time quite re-traumatizing because they listen to the evidence that is presented. And yeah, we're just looking forward for any sort of progress. And we're obviously, like, especially listening to the evidence, ask the Attorney General to drop the charges entirely because we don't see there being any criminal act committed by them.
Yeah, it's hard to see what criminal act they would have done. Like, if someone's going to send you back to I think, Libya is been in pretty much a state of civil war, or like definitely like a horrible conflict for a long time. You don't want to go back there, and we've done episodes on Libya on the Civil Fleet podcast with people who've escaped Libya and talking about the horrors there. It's like I just can't see what they've done.
Exactly, preventing a pushback itself is a legal act, right? Everybody has the right to defend themselves from being returned to a place of torture, of rape, of arbitrary detention, of slavery. This is like the institution of self-defense allows that to a person. You're also allowed to defend another person. So if this act of mediation, if this act of translation was something, then it was an act of self-defense, right? And this is what we've been trying to advocate for in the past. Yeah.
It's also like it boggles my mind that like I think there was like over 100 people, right? 108 or 10 or something like that. People that were rescued by the El Hiblu, and how 3 teenagers could. I mean, I don't know what the age of all those people were, but I imagine there's people older than them. But how did 3 teenagers get accused of being the ringleaders of this? It just it blows my mind. They were
it's funny though, if you meet them, like a couple of people that have met them after a while only, they said like, okay, they've known about the case, but the moment they sit together with them, they speak to them, they just realize how special they are. They're very smart. Like Amara, for example, the one who's been doing the translation, he was eventually the only person, as far as we know, who spoke enough French and enough English to, 1, communicate with the crew, and 2, translate to the people that were mostly, from the West African coast, from regions where people speak Bambara, Malinke, Fula, but like as a neo-colonial or a colonial language, mostly French, right? So the crew on the ship didn't speak any other language, and Amara went to a Catholic school, so he could speak both languages. And this is how he ended up in a situation, trying to help, but then actually being accused of facilitating whatever, right? Those elements of aggression.
Yeah, it's mad. And you've said the pre-trial is going on at the moment, and have they not come up with the charges of what they haven't come up with what they're going to charge them with yet? I guess they're trying to determine. But I've seen them reported as terrorists or reported as pirates, like you said. Which is just ridiculous. And
Yes.
I just, imagine if there was like 100 white people on a boat that was going to take them to Libya, and 3 people stopped them from being taken to Libya, they'd be heroes, right?
Exactly. Yes, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And those cases have occurred, right? You see one white person in distress somewhere, and like all assets, it doesn't even matter which country in Europe, you can name any country, all assets are mobilized to rescue one person. Since we're talking about Black people in the Mediterranean, people from the Southern Hemisphere, this is not worth it to communicate, right? So the narration of migration, criminalizing migration, in fact, has this huge effect on how people perceive the entire situation, how people are familiarized with death at sea, and just looking at the last big shipwreck, right, of Crotone, it's like it's horrific and extremely fascinating at the same time that like a shipwreck of this scale happens so often, but also 10 years ago, it's the same scenario, and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed in the way this is like prosecuted, they are assisted. It's still, it's something very scary and something very, you see, I'm lacking words.
Hi, so we're going to cut into the podcast at this point here to hear from one of the El Hiblu 3, Amara. I sent some questions over for him, which Jelka kindly passed on to Amara, and he recorded his answers. So I'm going to edit them as if it's a conversation, but he just sent us an audio file. Obviously, he had to be careful of what he says because he is currently going through a pre-trial at the moment. So what we've got is about 5 minutes of answers from him about what happened. Anyway, the first question that I asked him was how he felt on the El Hiblu ship and how the crew reacted to them.
I feel so worried, so scared. It's because they're silent. They keep silent, Nothing is coming out, whether good or bad. They're keeping silent, and they make me scared. Very, very worried. Because they might do anything. I don't know what they are planning. So I feel very, very scared. Very, very scared at this stage. Because I never knew that we are going to reach at this stage. I feel very, very scared, very, very worried. Because I don't know what they are planning now.
Tell us how you felt when the Maltese Special Forces raided the ship.
When the Maltese Special Forces get in the ship, I had 2 feelings. First feelings, I was afraid because I had never seen such, military people around me. So I feel very scared, afraid. I was very, very afraid and confused at the same time. Because there was no need for those, speculation. I feel very afraid. But at the same time, I was also happy. Because I think that yes, we have arrived to somewhere where our dignity, where we will be protected, where our voice will be here. That was what I was believing. That was in my mind that yes, this is hero, and our voice will be here. But I never knew that it's quite different.
Tell us, did you expect to be treated like this when you got to Europe?
I never believed that I would be treated like this. I never believed that I would be treated like this. Not once, because what we hear from people about Europe, it's not what I'm saying here. I thought here is a democratic place. Let's have a human right. That all the human rights have been respected. Should be respected. But I'm not saying that. I don't know. Are we not a human? Or we are different from other people who right have been respected? But we, since we have been here, none of our rights have been respected. None. If human rights exist, if human rights is existing, yes, then not here. I'm not saying there's not human right. Maybe somewhere else, but I'm not seeing any human right.
Tell us how you feel about your future now.
Just about my future, I mean, I have a little worried about my future because I don't know what is going to happen after this process or during this process. I don't know. But I think as a strong boy, I can make it to the future. I mean, a brighter future. I can make it. No matter what it takes, I will make a brighter future. I promise. But this process stopped me. This process stopped me from doing everything that I was thinking. I mean, that I had as a dream. You know, this process took me away. The process took me away. All the dream I had. But I can make it. In my future, I can make it after this process.
Okay, we're going to go back into the interview with Jelka now. So you're in Malta at the moment. You're not Maltese. You've said you were from Berlin, but do you know how have they been going down? How has this story been going down in Malta? How have the public and the media kind of treated the El Hiblu 3 in Malta? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously a subjective assessment, right? But what we've been trying to do with the campaign from the moments the guys were released, and we can the moments the guys were released from detention and got out on bail, we met and we agreed that a campaign for their case would be a good thing. And the campaign's biggest ambition, obviously, is to mobilize the public, right? Because eventually, if the trial is going to be in court, before criminal court, we're looking at a jury assessing the situation. So what we've been trying to do in the past 4 years, and I think to a degree we've been quite successful, is mobilizing the public, frequently informing, arranging documentaries with big channels such as the BBC, for example, or Times in Malta. And media obviously is independent, and a lot of media channels in Malta report about the case. And I haven't seen much, let's say, much media productions that are challenging the self-defense, the mediation narrative, you know. So I like the way the media reports about this is in a good way, I feel. And the public attention, as far as I can tell, as far as I perceive it, and I'm obviously also just in my cycle in a way, but the way I perceive it is quite positive. So, for example, the documentary we had with Times of Malta is, when you look at the comments, most of the comments are positive about the documentary, right? So I have the feeling the work media-wise, the work campaigning-wise is very useful, very helpful, and brings more attention to the case. And also, to be fair, we have to say that in Malta at the moment, there's a lot going on in the legal system, right? A lot of things need change. A lot of delays in other cases as well happen. So it's ridiculous the way this is proceeded for 4 years and delayed for 4 years. but also it's not standing out that much, right? So there's a lot of criticism anyways to how the legal system in Malta at the moment works. So I have the feeling, yes, the media reports helps a lot. The public is very helpful. The guys they have established, like their own lives to a degree. They have work, they have contracts, they're appreciated by their employers, by their colleagues. So they all, or school, appreciated by their comrades in school. So they do have, like, also in the social environments, a lot of people that support them, a lot of people that wanna help to bring justice to the case.
That's good to hear. Like it's the civil fleet occasionally gets comments on Twitter from right-wing Maltese people, and it's just like, it just seems quite strange to what they say to me on there. But obviously, that's not representative of the whole society. And I would have often wondered what it's like there, because it's quite small. In some ways, it's somewhat similar. It's kind of similar to the UK, but it's on a much smaller scale, I suppose. It's an island nation. That has, and the way that they've treated refugees, the country's armed forces, or treated people on the move across the Mediterranean since 2020 has been awful, right? They've just not they've not rescued anyone. They don't communicate with the I don't know, it's probably not right to say they've not rescued anyone, but they don't communicate whatsoever with the rest, the activist rescue ships, right? They just don't talk to communicate with them.
Of course. I think Malta had 2 or 3 rescues this year, and this compared with the numbers of arrivals all over the coast is it's not worth to mention. I mean, they need to do their work for sure, of course.
Yeah, so it's good to hear that there is backing there, and even in the media there, that's good to hear. Can you speak to what the politics are like there at all? Like, I don't know. I think they have a Labour government, but I'm not sure what that means. But can you speak to that at all?
I can try, but I have to say also that this is something I'm also still struggling to understand. So what is very good within the campaign is that we have enough Maltese people to understand the political system here well enough to to see who to engage with. I have the feeling politically people are not willing to speak out in cases like this. So there's a tendency on different levels here where people say, like, as this is a legal proceeding, one shouldn't voice an opinion, because it's the job of the court, of course, to identify what the charges are, to identify whether they're guilty or not. So that said, a lot of people from important areas, and this goes beyond Malta, of course, I'm not comfortable in speaking up on the situation, and politically it's been difficult, I have to say, to involve people, but we're trying to work on this, trying to address the case more and more again to politicians.
Yeah, it's a big case. It needs to be known about. Is it like, I'd be surprised if many people in Britain know about the Hiblu 3 actually. How about in Germany? Has it got much attention in Germany, in your country?
It's difficult for me to say, there's this phenomenon around us activists all that we obviously follow channels and engage with people that work in a similar area. So in the space of criminalization, obviously, and since the events are from Germany, and this is a case Amnesty, for example, is campaigning strongly on, I think the case is known because the white the criminalization cases on white people get quite some attention, and the people involved in, or the people accused of criminal acts, usually make an effort to put emphasis on the Black and brown people that are accused of crimes as well. So I think I have the feeling it is a case known in Germany to a degree, at least for people that are interested in migration and in criminalization of migration or criminalization of movement. But beyond this, it's difficult for me to assess.
For people like us, and probably the people listening to this podcast who really follow these situations closely, they probably know a lot about it. I often wonder what people think if they just tune into this podcast, just come to it by accident and then hear about all this kind of stuff. I often wonder, well, I wonder if that even happens, or if I wonder what they think. So
we've been trying to mobilize in Germany, though. In Germany, for example, we've been speaking a lot with the parliament. We had a parliamentarian, for example, German parliamentarian recently visiting some hearings. This is also what we're trying to advocate more for, to have international politicians to come look at the case and get more international attention as well.
Yeah, it's important to do that, right? Especially within the EU, because you're lucky enough to be in it still. Well, in a way, you can. There's pressure that you can apply there, right, through European Union institutions and stuff. So that's good to hear. Have you been to I don't know what the court cases, what it's like at this pre-trial phases? Have you been able to go to them, and are you able to speak to what it's been like for the three of them at all?
The hearings themselves, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, they differ a lot, right? So looking just back the 4 years, we had this extensive COVID period where people were at home, and also, of course, court hearings and so on got delayed, where some of us couldn't travel and so on. But since the beginning, the case has been documented well by journalists. We have a lot of local journalists that try always to attend the hearings and have always tried to attend the hearings, which is good. That gives the public a fundament of information they can access. We from the campaign, we also try to visit. I think at least in the past 2 years, we haven't missed a hearing. Again, during this high peak in COVID, it was a bit more difficult to come. For the guys themselves, obviously the level of frustration is very high, right? Every time we go, we hope for something to change towards any direction by now, right? While we were advocating all the time and hoping for just more definition in that they're not guilty. Right now, there's they just said a couple of days ago, they just want anything to happen now. It's obvious that it's creating too much pressure but again, there were so many different levels in this. Listening to testimonies, for example, of witnesses from the ship is something that just started very late. After 2 years of proceeding, the first eyewitnesses from the rescued people were heard, and there have been multiple issues with translation, with French dialects from West African regions being translated by French academics, and then they're being conversational challenges, obviously, coming through the same identified language but different language pattern, and a way of dealing with this which I find problematic personally. And for the guys listening to other people tell the story over and over again, and this being transformed into something that they're confronted with, it is obviously hard. Is challenging them a lot, and right now we just have delays, right? Because the prosecution is resting the case, and we're waiting for the Attorney General to file or to drop the charges. But we also had endless hearings where we were waiting in court for 3, 4, 5 hours, and then we were just told that it will be postponed or adjourned. And this level of emotional pressure is very difficult to imagine if it affects you. I can only say from my perspective, when I go there, how anxious I get, how stressed I get, and I'm not in the situation, right? I'm not affected.
Yeah, I can't really imagine what it must be like for the three, because it's just what they've gone through, what they must have gone through in Libya, and then what they went through at sea, and now what's happening to them in Malta. This is something that will never happen to me or you, probably. This kind of thing just won't happen to us in our lives. I just can't imagine quite what that's like. Yeah. The case is still, like you said, the hearings are still ongoing. Can you say when the next one is, or that might be out of date by the time I publish this? But when is the next one?
The next one now is scheduled for the 28th of April. So they're aiming for one hearing a month. However, during Christmas and during summer, there are more, there are larger breaks between the hearings. But I think there's a legal fundament in Malta that says like they have to be heard once a month. So that sums up to right now, I think at least 45 hearings were scheduled in the past or since the trial started. 45 hearings scheduled. A lot of them, again, as I said before, adjourned. But that's quite a high number. Huh? And the next one is in the end of April. But what is more important for us is that in the end of the month, we have the anniversary of the Hiblu 3, right? Of their arrival and arrest in Malta. So on the 26th and 28th, the things on the water happened. They were rescued. And then on the 28th, they were arrested. And we'll have some activity out in the public during the anniversary. So we'll do a public concert and a press conference and so on. And obviously, everybody is very welcome to attend this and to come to Malta and to join those events.
I would love to do that. I'm not. I'll see if I can make that. I'm not sure I can, but that would be really good to go to.
It would be great. Yes.
I shall definitely have the podcast out by then as well.
Cool.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about the El Hiblu 3? Actually, there was something I was going to say while you were talking. It just seems like, I'm not a legal expert at all. I'm pretty far from a legal. I don't obviously I don't know anything about Maltese law, but it seems absurd to me that it's been going on for 4 years and they still don't have any charges. I just like it seems Kafkaesque almost. Like I just can't. Hopefully, I use that term correctly, but it's just such a long process. I can't believe how long it's taken.
Yeah, it's extremely frustrating. You can't imagine, and we cannot do anything about it. Huh? There's like no way of engaging with this. There's like a lot of procedural things that, of course, have to happen, right? However, we would have as well liked all the witnesses, for example, to be invited to the hearing from the beginning. It's very, very difficult for us to understand how they only started calling the witnesses from the ship 2 years in, and then obviously didn't find all of them, right? So there's like a nature to this that is very problematic, I find. And then again, if you imagine you invite 100 witnesses, of course, the extensiveness of this is huge. I think the most frustrating part in this is that since the prosecution rests its case, which is since last summer, May, in fact, the first time they said they don't have any more evidence to bring, nothing is really happening, right? So we're just going and nobody can get involved and require a way to speed up the situation. There's no way for us to engage with this in a different way, and this like inability to help is extremely frustrating. And it's on the Attorney General. It's on the Attorney General to file or to drop the charges. And as long as this isn't done, we will continue to go to court once a month and listen to the magistrate adjourning the hearing.
It's just like a punishment in and of itself, right? To just keep them in this limbo for so long. But they're not in prison, right? You mentioned at the beginning they have to. Well, they're kind of living a life. I don't know if you can speak what they're doing with themselves. But what are they up to? Are they at school or work or anything? Are they able to do anything?
Yeah, both actually. I mean, 2 of them have quite stable contracts since a while, which is good. They hang out with their bosses. They have a good relationship. Amara's boss, for example, was also heard in one of the documentaries that we did with the Times of Malta. So there's like as for like life stability, they've achieved this amazingly quick to get some, to use their time well. And then there's also one of them is going to school at the moment and working on the side. So they do a lot, they are making a huge effort for this time that is taken away from them, where they don't have ownership over their own lives, to still use that. However, I imagine they would all go to school and learn and develop quickly if they had not this like huge occupation of what's going to happen with my life, what is going to happen if they ask me to go to jail for life because I've been translating on the ship. So yeah, but like if you look at them, you know, outside of court, they are like extremely smart and charismatic young men. I admire them a lot. I have a lot of really a lot of respect for them, and yeah, one of them has a child now in Malta, and which attends childcare. So there's like, you know, there's this parallel life, and then there's this constant threat hanging over their heads of, okay, it can happen anytime, right? Because the downside of this trial also dragging on for so long is not just that we have those constant hearings, but it can happen at any time that they get a notification that they have to show up for court because the Attorney General now files charges, and then immediately this changes everything.
Well, that's good to hear that, you know, it's not just that they have lives apart from this stuff. I mean, obviously their life is affected by this, but yeah, it's good to hear. So I think I was going to change topics now to a sort of more broader area. But before we do that, was there anything, Jelka, that you wanted to add about the situation, about the El Hiblu 3? Was there anything I should have asked that I haven't?
No, I think it's all right. I think what helps a lot is that people raise awareness, follow the story, report about it, confront the authorities, right? The one thing that I think can help is showing to the politicians and showing to the Ministry of Justice and the Office of the Attorney General that people pay attention. So anything that listeners feel like being able to do is, of course, like raising awareness or also donating to the campaign, help us like sustain our work in a way. Those things are obviously very, very helpful, and a part of this. No, thanks. I think questions were great so far.
Cool, and I'm gonna have links if I could find the Times of Malta documentary, which I should be able to.
I'll send you everything.
Thank you. I'll put those in the show notes so people can find them. I'll link to them on Twitter and stuff when I share out this episode as well.
Great.
And also like the El Hiblu 3, the Save El Hiblu 3 website, which I'll also link to, is really good. And there's a book, right? That
Yes.
And that's really, I've read bits of it. I haven't read it all. I'm coming in and out of it. But it's really good. And like I've read, there's testimonies by Abdul, Amara, and Abdalla, about what happened to them, and it's really good reading. And I suggest everyone listens, goes and reads those.
Yeah, true. Maybe in fact, this is the one thing maybe I forgot to mention. The book is something we published last spring, and it entails of course, for the first time, the voices of the three telling their own story, and also perspectives from the Freedom Commission, which we founded like half a year before that. And the Freedom Commission essentially has the function, the Freedom Commission is compiled of representatives from large NGOs, international human rights defenders, so people that have credibility in different sectors, whether it's academia, politics, legal stuff, or activist spaces. And all the voices from the Freedom Commission are in this book. And the book is, we have a lot of printed versions in French and English, but they're also accessible through the website as ebooks. So anybody who wants to have the book in paper book can write us via email, and otherwise it's accessible through the website.
My last question, Jelka, is it's the big one I like to ask at the end of every episode. Is the big picture, sort of the whole of Europe. There's lots of horrible stuff happening to people on the move at Europe's edges at the moment. So, how are you feeling about the future? What's happening? Actually, I always ask people how they're feeling, and it's usually the same answer, like quite depressed about what's happening. So I'm going to ask that, but I'd like to know how you're feeling about it. But then also, what do you think we can do to change this?
Interesting, huh? So I wonder, obviously, if you want to start with the depressing stuff, we do that. No, but obviously what we see in terms of changes, it's very problematic and very scary, right? On so many different in so many different regions, how the repression and the border management is built up, and how much is taken, or like how much more struggle the people have to go through to actually find dignity and life. And of course this is all very scary. At the same time, I would say, like, you know, if we lose hope, if we lose our motivation, then we lost everything. And I do think at the same time that the movement of solidarity is very strong, right? For me, for example, the activist work I do is also sort of catalyzing all the fear and anxiety about about negative political change to the right. So being involved, you know, and trying to do my bits in changing and narrating is giving me a lot of strength, actually. So this one feeds from another. And when I see, for example, like, and this I find quite hopeful, right, that movements rise in different places, such as the refugees in Libya movement that has grown so big and has such a large support structure as well, and people mobilize in Tunisia at the moment, that looking at how much strength is there within the pain that people suffer, I see there is also, you know, there's a lot of potential, and that we grow stronger, I feel, and that we are a large movement, in fact, you know. And I have the hope that this, like, you know, those topics become more prominent everywhere. And you see, like, on so many different levels, there's all the forensic reconstructions of human rights violations, for example, that play a big role also in showing this to the public, bringing this beyond the activist space and bringing this into museums and galleries, and talking about human rights deprivation everywhere. And especially, I have my focus in criminalization of migration, and we work on a lot of projects at the moment, you know, to raise more awareness, to connect better, to facilitate more immediate help, and so on. And I see there's strength, and I see there's potential, and I have the feeling I'm surrounded by so many amazing people that do so great work that it gives me a lot of hope to a degree.
Yes, that's good. That's how I need to frame that question from now on. And no, that was a really good answer. Thank you, Jelka. Like, it's really, I think, you know, doing, like, if you're really depressed about what's happening to people at the borders and what's happening to what Europe's doing to these people, I think, you know, taking action, raising awareness of it is a way to combat that, the depression of it, of what's happening. You have to do something, I think. And I've been like, sorry, you carry on.
No, I have a bad tendency of interrupting.
So do I.
Very bad habit. People can also get more radical in their way of engaging, right? All the people that always say, like, what can I do? What can I do? Why am I so frustrated? Like, just in an abstract way, look at the last generation movements, right? People that glue themselves to the street. It's a very peaceful act, but disrupts the entire society. I think, especially looking at the differentiation between the worth of Black lives and the worth of white lives, right? Why don't people actually, you know, like, be more active and use their power to get involved in direct actions of solidarity? I think there's so much potential. It's crazy. It's not just marching in the streets in metropolitan cities, right? You know, it's like going to the borders and I don't know what I'm trying to say. Maybe cut this. Never mind. Let's just go on.
Well, this project's it's good to see that in my hometown. I'm living in London, but I'm not from here. I'm from, like, the Midlands, which is, you know, very different place. But, you know, even there's refugee solidarity stuff and migrant solidarity works and stuff. Which, whenever I see them, like, yes. Even in my hometown, there's, you know, people can, you know, they see there's something wrong and they want to do something about it. I think it's Derbyshire Refugee Solidarity or something. Which whenever I see them I follow them on social media. And it fills me with hope that's going.
Great.
So I think I've asked everything I wanted to, Jelka. I know we could probably talk about this continuously for like 3 or 4 hours. But you know,
sure.
Was there anything else, or should we finish the podcast here?
No, it's great. From my side, it's great. And again, you're more than welcome to join us during the anniversary weekend. Join our press conference and solidarity actions, social gatherings, and so on. And Thanks for having me, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk about the case again 4 years into into what happened.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much for your time. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, that was episode 37 of the Civil Fleet podcast. Thanks again to Jelka for coming and talking to us. Thanks so much to Amara for sending us that audio clip. And thanks to you for listening. Thanks to everyone who shared our stories, who shared the podcast. If you could rate it, if you have rated it, that would be amazing. If you've donated to us, which you can do at co-fi.com/civilfleet, I would greatly appreciate any help we can get whatsoever. A few people have donated recently, and it's really motivating. It also helps to cover the costs of running this thing, which, to be fair, is not that much. But anyway, any donations, absolutely fantastic. What else do I have to say? Go check out the website, civilfleet.com. You can find that story I mentioned at the beginning. There should be some new ones coming too as well. What else do we have to talk about? Do you know, I think that's it. Sometimes I ramble on too much at the end here, like I'm doing now. So let's just finish here. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in episode 38. Until next time, bye.